tell you what, David, of all the things to talk about, you want to kick off with a bit of football in the sun? Mind you, you are a football fanatic.
Well, yeah, I'm a football fanatic, and I have to admit error here. Mystic Mellor was wrong in predicting that this would be a bit of a dead thing, that the BBC were covering on their various channels every game in the European Championships, because what they couldn't be sure of was that England would get through all the rounds so far. I watched the game last night. There'll be a real big atmosphere come Sunday. We don't yet know who they're going to be playing against, but it's interesting. They're getting, 7 to 9 million are watching these games. Now, they're lucky there isn't a World Cup this summer, and, they're very lucky that there isn't a lot of competition. But I think this could be the breakthrough for women's football. I think that people, once they've started getting used to watching it, will stay used to watching it, and that's a good thing. Unless, of course, there may be some women who think it's not very feminine to be booting a ball around and committing all manner of unmentionable fouls. But as someone who's lived my life along those lines, I'm quite happy to see women kicking the what's-it out of each other. It's not bad. I'm up for that.
Well, the final will be on Sunday against, as you say, either France or Germany. We don't know. We'll find out later on this evening. Claire, let's talk about, it's a really awful story, actually. This new research about air pollution and what that could be doing to causing dementia.
Absolutely, Rosie. Dementia, I didn't realise this. Last year, dementia was the second leading cause of death after COVID. Unfortunately, my father was one of those deaths. Dementia is such a horrible, horrible illness. It robs not only the person of their faculties, mental and physical, but also the family and the friends as well, because they don't recognise the dementia sufferer, the dementia patient. Now, this report, which is front page of the Daily Mail today, unfortunately, it doesn't show geographically where the samples were taken. It doesn't show geographically where the reports were led and researched in. However, the overriding cause for concern is that air pollution is a likely cause of dementia. And what they're saying is there was in 2018, there was a 30% in cases, 30% cases of the new cases that were found, they believe was a direct correlation to air pollution. They're saying that the emissions from cars, the emissions from pollution, the emissions from manufacturing industries, etc., can actually go into the bloodstream through your blood, and it'll defend it won't defend the brain's ability to send the synapses to your body, and also through breathing. It can come through your nasal cavity.
But we need to be more aware of all this. I mean, there was stuff donkeys years ago saying dementia. They thought dementia and Alzheimer's could be caused by or exacerbated by aluminium cans.
Exactly.
Because, all these things that it's all putting stuff in our body.
And this is why putting out headlines like this on front pages is not particularly helpful. In the past, when we've got the ULIS zones in London, we're trying to go electric with the cars. I actually think maybe there's something different. Maybe there's something more to it than this, that they're trying to lobby through maybe an undercurrent of political agenda. It's not helpful, I don't think, to have headlines like that, because without definitive evidence, we won't know. Because like you said, years ago it was aluminium pans. There is definitely something environmental, and hopefully it's not genetic.
Yeah. David, we've got to talk about the rail strikes.
But I felt we had a little nibble at it earlier on. But, there's an interesting story on page 2 of the Telegraph, which says rail pay deal blocked by union bosses. Strikes were close to being called off before RMT chiefs rejected negotiators' sweetened agreement. Look, I'm not a huge advocate of conspiracy theories, but I've taken a view right from the start of this, and there are precedents for this, that the rail unions regard their membership as a battering ram to damage an already weakened government. And there is no reason why, if you read this story, this whole thing shouldn't have been settled, and you will end up with the railways that, after all, are losing money hand over fist, railway workers being a lot better off than equivalent manual workers elsewhere, something that our viewers have been emailing us about. And I just think the perpetuation of this strike is not only not good for the country and certainly not good for the government, it's not actually good for the members of the union, but that isn't what the RMT are really thinking.
How do you deal with it, though? How do you deal with it without... Because the issue is, if the unions aren't getting what they want, or more than they're being offered at the moment, we are going to see continuing strikes.
Well, one thing that the government can't do is just chuck its hand in. The other thing, of course, the government has the scope, and a number of papers have already covered this, where the law can be changed so that the withdrawal of services, so-called, through industrial action, they have to maintain a certain level of service. And that would throw the cat among the pigeons. In the past, it has needed statutory intervention to control Wildcat strikes, and I think they'll have to do that again. And I just hope somewhere along the line there are people thinking serious thoughts about this rather than, frankly, the sort of appalling distraction of this over-prolonged Tory leadership.
Yeah, but the reality is British Airways themselves have come out and said they want to enforce industrial action over the summer period as well. And I think that the timely introduction of the very jurisdiction that you were talking about there is very, very timely, because we don't want disruption. No one is for disruption, let alone anyone like Mick Lynch. And I am a fan of Mick Lynch. And I think it's very important that people, especially workers, have a voice. And I'm looking specifically at the moment, and I want to discuss the impact that the hospitality industry are actually going through now too. And we have got such a glut of vacancies for the hospitality industry, and yet some of the companies aren't looking after their employees. I think unions are a great thing, and I applaud people like Unison, companies like Unison, trade unions like Unison, that will fight the corner for better pay, better conditions for workers, because it's not easy out there.
I'll tell you what, David, what always comes through on this, I had a lot of emails talking about MPs' pay rises. Now, I know IPSA sets pay rises. It's independent. However, Dave says the whole public sector should get the same percentage pay rise as each other. MPs are part of the public sector, so they shouldn't get a bigger percentage than the rest. Just on that issue, would you agree?
Ever since I was in politics, there were lots of arguments about whether MPs were paid enough. Personally, I think one of the problems that there has been in politics is that because they can't increase MPs' salaries as much as they would want, the change from my day, and I ceased to be a Member of Parliament in 1997, is the amount of money they get throw around on support staff. And that is a con. And, of course, the number of support staff floating around Parliament has caused an awful lot of the problems. When I was a Member of Parliament, there just weren't a lot of people hanging around trying to catch the eye of a vulnerable Member of Parliament or a not so vulnerable Member of Parliament trying to catch the eye of a support staff worker. And I think that the whole thing is wrong, not least because MPs are in charge of what they pay, and a number of wives who get a nice little job and all the rest of it. If we're going to pay for the support staff, the money should come from a central fund and be dealt with on the basis that these people are employed by Parliament, not by individual MPs.
And should be held to scrutiny against the parliamentary standards as well.
Exactly.
We're going to be talking more about strike action on the programme, hoping to hear from Mick Lynch himself, and then the Transport Secretary will be on the programme just after 9 o'clock. So particularly if you've got questions for either of those, get in touch with us. But in the meantime, Claire, let's move on and talk about Iceland, because the head of Iceland's been talking about soaring costs.
Yep.
Here we have a problem. Who should swallow up that? Is it the consumer or the company?
Well, he's saying the company should play a part in this, and I think this should be welcomed. I think it's great news. Iceland are saying firms must accept low profits to help our customers get through this crisis. Not only are Iceland helping their customers, TSB yesterday and Aldi are saying they're going to help their staff get through as well. They're taking money from their profits, their big pots of money, and giving it back to their staff. I think the difference between what the unions are doing now than what they did in 1979, the winter of discontent, is the fact they had too much power. Now I think the elites have got too much power. Private companies have got too much money. As you know, everything's held up for pensions, etc., etc. But I really welcome this. I think this is great news that firms are actually, they've gone like that and they've taken the wind change of public opinion and are actually doing something about it. Well done. Keep it up.
It's a bit surprising, David, in a sense, because a lot of companies obviously just want to capitalise on the market economy. You can understand it, though it doesn't help us out.
No, I agree. And as the member of our household, as a new man, I do the supermarket shopping.
Excellent.
Oh, I'd love to see that. Do you push a trolley?
No, I don't need a trolley. A muscle man like me, I can carry my basket. But I got to tell you that it's very noticeable, for instance, the price of things like butter and how much that has gone up. And, OK, I'm still in a happy position of being reasonably well able to afford these things. I feel sorry for people who are shopping on a budget and suddenly they find 20, 30% increases. Now, I believe that wherever possible, businesses should look after their customers. And if there's a moment for a bit of belt tightening, it shouldn't just be the customers who have to tighten their belts.
Yes.
No, it's interesting.
So eating less butter will make it easier for them to tighten their belts.
Yes,
but that's
it will.
A different issue.
It will. I'll tell you what, though, it is... I'll tell you what struck me, because I've just had... I'm on one of these gas tariff things. It comes to an end in September.
Yeah.
And
then where's
they're
it
now
gonna
saying
go?
the cheapest option from September is to go on the variable price. Rather than... Because if you go on that's going to be cheaper than getting a prepaid deal, though, of course, it means it might protect you against... But they want to charge me £700 a month.
It's
on a set price.
It's absolutely abominable.
Which is just like,
And Russia are putting the squeeze on their energy through Gazprom to Germany as well. So
all that, amidst all of that, and again, like you, David, I'm in a better position than a lot of people to be able to afford stuff. And so you just think, well, if I'm balking at that, then what on earth are people like whoever's got in touch this morning, Wayne, who's on 24 grand a year, and his wife who's on 18 grand a year, what on earth are they going to do in these circumstances?
I agree, and over the years, certainly I've made myself responsible for the family shopping. A lot of items did not change in price very much, and suddenly there's been a catastrophic increase across the board. And, I still remember growing up in a not especially moneyed household and being educated with a lot of people for whom money was a scarce commodity down there in Dorset at state schools. I don't know how some people are coping. I really don't. But I certainly think it is a major issue that has got to be addressed, not just by government, but it's got to be addressed by the companies as well. Now, I suppose if we had someone from Tesco here, I normally shop in a Tesco, and it's the most convenient one for me, they would say, we are doing this and we are doing that. And indeed, there are still price offers in Tesco that are very attractive. But at the end of the day, if there is uncertainty about where your next meal is coming from or whether you can afford your next meal, it casts a blight over the whole
of society.
Of the community, of course.
Yeah, it does.
It's horrible.
Look, we're going to leave it there for now. Claire, David, thank you. We'll see you in the next hour.